Night of the Hunt 6. Caddock knew that in order to reach a hill, one needed a proper chalice. And Caddock knew that only the church possessed such chalices. What he did not know was where. He had also never been in the labyrinth. He knew it was large, and therefore had no clue how long the search would take him. After all, he would be searching for something so many others were searching for, and had yet to find. If Byrgenwerth had been searching for Queen Yarnam, or at least been aware of her, the church was undoubtedly doing the same. The more immediate problem was that he did not know where the church kept their chalices. Was it perhaps preferable to engage with the prospectors as an alternative for access? He was watching the grand clock tower of the cathedral, down from the streets of the cathedral ward, pondering his options. It likely wasn't a good alternative, seeing that the church dictated who to send on certain expeditions. And he probably did not have any noticeable renown with the institution, despite essentially working for them. He was, admittedly, wasting time. It was plain even to himself. Although the goal was clear, the task to achieve it felt larger than himself. An impossible one that had him racked with questions. Questions he ought not to have. Questions that prevented one living a normal life. One sheltered from horrible truths that are so omnipresent in everyone's lives, it makes little difference if one is aware of them or not. So, why know in the first place? He turned away from the tower, looking around the garden he was in, leaning against a tree. The dawn was not yet upon him. The cloudless sky had just grown slightly brighter. He looked away, because he had been distracted by a sound. The sound of a lonesome bell. It was curious, since it sounded detached, like someone was purposefully ringing it somewhere nearby, out of sight. As he searched, he wondered why someone would go around ringing a bell at such an hour. Then the wind seemed to pick up, but only in sound. He did not feel an environmental shift, but heard how the sound of the bell changed and faded out with the blowing of a breeze. He searched the empty park area, and with a monument of several praying statues in the middle. Out from behind it stepped a man, wielding a mace. Caddock almost mistook him for a beast at first, since large horns emerged from his head atop a mantle of fur. But seeing how he moved composedly like only a hunter would, it was at least not a physical beast. He also contemplated briefly if the sight was at all real, since he did not seem to be physically there. There was a very subtle red aura around him that he could not explain. But his intentions were very real, as he advanced menacingly towards him, holding the spiked mace to his side, ready for battle. The bells toll, have you? The man said in a gruff voice. A hunter of secrets. Secrets that should be best left alone. Caddock retrieved his blade of mercy, simply to show it. You have a problem with that? The mantle of fur was indeed separate from the man, as it hung like a cowl over his head. He sniggered wickedly. It's for your own good. Better a life of ignorance than a life of madness. Only a madman would disagree. Caddock stepped out from under the tree and separated the blade in two. Oh, but you shouldn't cling to a hunt for truth. It is a sickness, as much as any scourge. A sickness that must be treated before it spreads. Caddock slowly stepped to the side, as did the man. Then he lunged forward with the mace to strike down at him. Caddock leapt past him and sliced shallowly at his arm. The man jumped away, laughing as if he was simply a spectator to the conflict, and not a participant. You don't even know what cause you're struggling for. He rapidly turned and struck with the mace. The man was possessed by the battle. The words he spoke and the way he moved, all of his being clearly showed a wild frenzy that prohibited his sense of pain. Caddock leapt back from the strike, preferring to let the man strike before himself did so. Fool! Only when you are wrested from the truth you seek will you realize what a beast you've become. Caddock flinched when the man did the unthinkable. He plunged the mace straight into his own stomach, grunting in pain and stumbling where he stood. Just like me. He withdrew the mace, pulling along a horrid amount of blood that formed itself on the mace, exploding out from him to take the shape of an even larger weapon, almost the size of himself. A massive club with freakish spikes came swinging down upon him as the man jumped at him, screaming. Caddock could not possibly hope to deflect a weapon of such proportions, and jumped helplessly out of the way. The blood was so mighty, and the blood was firm enough to leave a mark in the ground after impact. He turned and stood up in the same motion, leaping at the man's exposed side. With the giant hammer still planted in the ground, he shifted his stance around the handle so it was positioned in between them. In the spin, he dragged it from the ground and swung it horizontally. Caddock ducked, but the man continued to spin around, this time dragging it along the ground, culminating in a massive uppercut swing, forcing Caddock further away. With such a large weapon, despite its unwieldiness, he had few opportunities to get close enough. Each time he tried to flank him, the man swung around with the giant mace, forcing him to step back to avoid it. He merged his blades, and as he jumped close, the man tried to swing down at him. Caddock fired his pistol, causing the man to stagger. He then stepped close to him and stabbed into the man's side, but his adversary was quick to push him away by turning and shoving him with the elongated bloody pommel end of the hammer. They stumbled away from each other, and upon turning back to him, he saw him bring the mace to strike over his head down at him. Caddock leapt towards him, knowing the hammerhead would miss him as he passed it. He ducked low and separated the blades, holding his right in front of him while his left lowered to the ground behind him. He did not count on the man pulling back as he struck down, causing the handle to land on his left shoulder, resulting in the spikes being jammed into his back as he pulled the mace closer. It also pushed Caddock forward to him, getting him close enough to stab the right blade into the side of the man's throat and the left into his stomach. They glared at each other, each enduring their own form of pain. However, the man suffered more as his body grew more and more tense until he lost his grip of the mace. When Caddock pulled out the blades, he simply fell backwards. But just as his body was about to hit the ground, it vanished, leaving a faint mist evaporating, along with that red aura he had brought. He dropped the left blade as his shoulder was completely numb with stinging pain. The mace had vanished with him, but the wound had not. The sensation had spread down his entire arm, causing his fingers to suffer from jitters, as well as warm blood drenching his garb and pouring down his arm. He stood with his face down into the ground, where the man's body had vanished, then at the blade he had dropped. Was a hunter of secrets a hunter telling himself a lie? That when one hunts for secrets, the prey is so obscure one truly gets lost in the hunt. And the more they keep telling themselves, they will surely know the truth when they catch it, the more likely they are to miss it in all its purity. It had been a while since Caddock had slept through the entire morning and a bit into the afternoon. The night's hunt with Henrik and Gascoigne had conjured a particular drowsiness that he loathed, but recalled with some degree of nostalgia. However, he was awoken by a very familiar ache in his arm, as it was not very common for him to emerge from slumber in such a fashion. The sun, as it shone into the old workshop grounds, did serve to restore his energy. Seated outstretched on the long steps ascending the workshop building, it felt like each time he closed his eyes he fell asleep for a couple of minutes. For suddenly, the black feathered crow hunter was stepping through the garden. You must be the only hunter who still visits this workshop. He leaned himself upward and rested his arms on his knees as she came up to the foot of the stone steps, their eyes on an even level despite him being seated. Me not being a hunter makes you the only one. Yes, I suppose few visits the real workshop these days. Not to pry, but how is work? The beaked masked scanned the surroundings. Well enough. Perhaps I can say it is running more smoothly now than before. How come? She delayed responding, continuing to look over certain details of the garden. What about you? Saw you hunting with Henrik and Gascoigne. You know they have quite a reputation among the hunters. He nodded. Felt like they were the only ones to trust. Trust? Not to become beasts? Yeah, well, you could say that. Is there something on your mind? Perhaps I was wrong. The church, the hunters, you. Everyone is the cause of people disappearing. It must look strange to you. That's why I'm here. And you too, I would say. But what's the answer? There must be someone out there that preys on the weak, snatches them up in the dark, never to be seen again. Like me? He shook his head and sighed deeply. I mean the innocent. What's they got to do with the hunt? The blood or the beasts? Nothing. They're just people, wrapped up in this mess. You saw the holy blades, right, Caddock? Not exactly the brave Spartans Ludwig wants them to be, no? Holy warriors. Rabid lunatics, more like. They are as bloodthirsty as the beasts. And Ludwig. Poor fool does not even see it. Wrapped up in the hunt, as he is. If only he saw, then perhaps he could rest, save himself. Caddock looked up curiously at her. She looked down, causing the brim of her hat to obscure the eyes of the mask. It struck him how easy it can be to interpret the crow as some sort of ghost. An ill omen come to life. Perhaps even something close to a beast of some kind. Having inhabited the role, he never liked that part of the persona, but realized now that it was easy to earn it. He reminded himself that despite the harrowing guise and graven voice, there was a woman behind it all. A woman that, despite her efforts, must have been affected in some way. A human being, after all. He is a good man, that Ludwig. He wants only the best for his men. That he does. She faintly shook her head and looked up at him. But his men are a mess. Aspiring to their captain. They are bigger fools than him. Who can say how many of those innocents have been caught in their frenzy? You have taken many of his men away, it sounds like. They are the worst. Only surpassed by those that were once clerics of the church. I'm not surprised that people vanish with those around. Set up for beasthood as soon as they set foot beyond the church gate. Caddock laid his face into his hands. His aim to uncover the lost individual suddenly felt meaningless to him. But what else could he do? Join the hunters again? Kill beasts that would only grow in numbers to the next night? Become a cleric to study forth a cure that seemed destined to never be? Could he not even find those lost ones? Then what good was left in Yharnam? She took off her mask, and he was greeted by the woman Eileen, with her raven black hair and dark green eyes. Caddock. She looked down at the mask held in her hands. You hunted your fellows. They were men once. Friends. Good people. I know that is still true. But with all this blood, these dark nights, I see only beasts beyond redemption, save for the mercy of a blade. What I want to say is, I suppose, did a hunt ever cause you to doubt? Is this truly such a mercy? Did you ever grow tired of the killing? It must be done. I know, and I've heard it plenty of times. But... She sighed and bit her lower lip, while the center of her brow wrinkled. Did you ever feel it growing harder to kill? He stood up. Her eyes darted to him as he did so, but quickly her shoulders released the tension, and she looked down into the ground again. He walked over and stood at her side. Do you happen to know what the old master, the first hunter, used to say? She looked up and seemed at first to be at a loss. But then her eyes softened and her expression shifted knowingly. To fear the old blood. He nodded and smirked before putting his hand reassuringly on her shoulder. Right now, the night lies the heaviest. None of us can see past our own dreams. Unfortunately, they are nightmares. But despite it all, the morning always comes, knowing that we cannot rightly do anything else than struggle through the darkness, even if it costs us our lives. For a time will come when all will look back upon what we do now, those that we fight for, and remember what we did, and think it all a mere bad dream. Bloodletter. The demented hunter weapon brandished by Brador, the Healing Church assassin. The bloodletter assumes its true and terrifying form after it draws upon the blood from the inner reaches of one's body and soul. It is the only effective means of expelling tainted blood, or so Brador, isolated in his cell, continued to believe.